talking about sustainable finance. Very relevant, very interesting research. I'm very happy to be joined by the lead author of this chapter, Evan Papageorgiou. You are also the Chief of the Monetary and Capital Markets Department of the IMF. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you very much, Elizabeth.
Before we get into this chapter about sustainable finance, let's just quickly provide a definition of what that is. Maybe not everyone out there knows. So what are we talking about when we talk about sustainable finance? Maybe give us a few examples.
Yeah, exactly. Sustainable finance does not have one unique definition. What we define as sustainable finance in the Global Financial Stability Report is the incorporation of environmental, social, and governance principles into business and investing decisions. To give you an example, whereas in the past an investor would make asset allocation decisions based on strictly risk-return characteristics, a sustainable investor now would perhaps consider the impact to the environment from their investment, ethical considerations such as fair trade or labor issues.
Why does this matter? Let's first talk about when it comes to the findings of the research. What did you find the impact was on banks and on specific sectors?
It matters a lot. It matters for banks, it matters for firms, it matters for policymakers, it matters for the IMF. There are many reasons. The most important reason, Elizabeth, is it matters because it has an impact on the bottom line, and it has an impact on financial performance and on risks. You mentioned banks. Banks is actually one very important one. All elements of environmental, social, and governance principles can affect the performance of a bank, can affect the way it operates, the way it goes about its business by dispersing loans, and it matters a lot for the ability to weather risks. Consider the case of climate change. You have droughts and floods and more extreme weather phenomena. A bank may have to readjust its lending portfolio, for example, to the agricultural sector, because they know that they will not be able to control the risks associated with that. So there's real risks there. Insurance companies as well. We have many examples of them not being able to cover carbon-intensive sectors such as mining.
And when you talk about the kind of broader financial system, are there impacts there as well?
There are, as you can understand, just the very essence of risk entailed from environmental, social, or governance would create perhaps big price swings, bigger risks for future impairments, and asset price declines in the future could propagate or could amplify risks in the future, if you will.
And there are different kinds of risks that you highlight in the report.
That's right.
Physical, for one.
That's right.
Perhaps just quickly touch on those.
Yes, exactly. So physical risks are the risks associated with the actual damage to property or infrastructure from extreme weather phenomena. There's also these so-called transition risks, and these are the risks relating to the decline in asset prices or other assets arising from the adjustment to a lower carbon economy. The two tend to be slightly different. Physical risks are here with us now. Transition risks are here as well, but they will be with us for much longer.
Why is this something that investors should care about?
Yeah, absolutely. Investors are, in fact, caring more and more about it. You've had a big increase in the number of funds that have a sustainability mandate or a sustainability focus, and which goes to show also the great interest that has generated over the last 10, 15 years. They care more and more because in the end it's a matter about protecting the portfolio, protecting their own pocket, if you will, doing the right thing in many ways, and also being able to understand how would sustainability affect everybody in all facets of life, including your financial decisions.
So talk about that protecting your portfolio aspect, because there's certainly a notion out there that, okay, this might be the right thing to do to invest in companies that have good goals on corporate governance or workplace development. But does it affect the performance if you make those investments?
Yeah, that is a good question. It used to. And if I may say, sustainable finance, ESG as some people call it, sustainable investing has changed quite a lot in the last 20 or even 10 years, What used to be originally sustainable investing, used to be that people who were concerned about the environment would try not to allocate their capital to fund energy-intensive firms such as oil and gas, for example. And that used to be called an exclusionary principle or negative screening. Sustainable finance has actually changed quite a lot over the years. Now, instead of excluding entire firms or entire sectors, you would look to partner with those firms to create more impact. In other words, do impact investing. Instead of doing negative screening, you could do positive screening. You could include firms with best-in-class characteristics, or that would maintain several certain norms, if you will. And so the changes from within rather than trying to impose some harsh restrictions. And this is changing, whereas then you may have had some underperformance by excluding oil and gas, as I mentioned. Now the new forms of sustainable finance try to correct for that. And that's what we find from our research as well. When we look at the performance of equity funds with explicit sustainability mandates and we compare them to those that do not have them, regular funds, we do not find a significant difference in the performance. In other words, a sustainable investor does not need to underperform non-sustainable investors controlling for the type and the size of the fund.
So an investor might not be giving up returns by choosing to invest in companies with those ESG values.
That's right. In certain cases they do not. And of course there's many flavors of this that one can do on equities or in fixed income. But generally this does not need to be the case.
Quick reminder to all of you out there watching on Twitter, you can download this research on imf.org if you want to look into the findings. Some very nice charts too, if I do say so myself. But I want to get in a little bit towards the policy implications of what this means. So what needs to be done to kind of encourage this? I guess let's start from the investment perspective. There's a lot of interest, but it's still just a small chunk of the overall funds out there. What needs to be done to make sustainable finance more widespread?
You're right. Things have changed a lot, and perhaps even 5 years ago, Elizabeth, we wouldn't be having this conversation. There are some policies, some policy recommendations we put out in the report. There are some important issues. First, we believe disclosures have to be improved on, disclosures by corporates. So far, they're mostly voluntary and can be inconsistent at times. Standardization would go a long way in creating a greater momentum for sustainable finance to keep growing. Multilateral cooperation, this is where we come in as the IMF, as a multilateral organization. Multilateral cooperation could go a long way in breaking down barriers in communication, in creating common standards, and in avoiding having a situation where one standard in one country would not apply to another. You may have heard the term greenwashing, which is also very important. The IMF, just from our point of view, we do a lot more work. We try to incorporate all of the sustainability considerations in our surveillance. What we've been discussing the last few minutes with the Global Financial Stability Report is one of them. We also do a lot more work on the bilateral, direct on how we speak to our member countries. And we try to incorporate a lot of these things in everything we do.
And we're kicking off the annual meetings just be starting over the next week, so will this remain a focus over the next week for you and for the IMF?
Absolutely. In fact, we have a debate with our new managing director next week, so you're welcome to, you're invited to attend to that.
Invite all the viewers out there as well. Thank you so much for joining today, Evan, for this discussion. Let us know what you think about the research. Let us know what you think about this topic in general in the comments and in general on the conversation. Thanks so much.